Welcome to yet another episode of the mplyLebo Leadership Podcast, where we explore leadership, workplace culture, and the principles that shape exceptional leaders. I'm your host, Lebo, and today we're tackling a crucial yet often overlooked aspect of leadership. What is that? Normalizing courageous conversations to unlock the potential in others. Let's be honest, folks. Most people avoid difficult conversations, whether it's giving tough feedback, addressing underperformance, or challenging the limiting beliefs, that we often embrace. We tend to sidestep these conversations out of fear of conflict or discomfort. But as leaders, avoiding these conversations means we are holding back our teams, our businesses, and even ourselves. So, today we'll discuss. As you know, I always bring you a couple of themes so we can track together. Here are the three themes that we will discuss. One, why courageous conversations matter in leadership. Second, what holds us back from having them. And third, how to build a culture where these conversations are normalized. By the end of this episode, I hope you'll see courageous conversations as not just necessary, but as a tool for unlocking the hidden potential in those around you. Are you ready? Let's dive right in. Why courageous conversations matter in relationships? Here's why. As a leader, one of your greatest responsibilities is to bring out the best in your people. This doesn't happen by avoiding tough topics. It happens by leaning into them. Easier said than done, right? But you got to lean in. Think about the leaders who have impacted your life. I can certainly think of a couple in my own life and career. Chances are these leaders weren't the ones who only told you what you wanted to hear, if you hear what I mean. They didn't always tell you what you wanted to hear. They were the ones who challenged you, who gave you feedback, even when it was hard to hear, because they saw your potential and wanted you to grow. A well-timed, courageous conversation, and that's very critical, a well-timed, courageous conversation. Because sometimes you can choose to have the right conversation at the wrong time. If an employee or a colleague or a team member is having a horrible day, or they're experiencing a bereavement at home, or just going through their own personal trauma, that might not be the right time to have a courageous conversation. So a well-timed, courageous conversation can do a couple of things. One, it can correct a destructive habit before it damages a career. Second, it can encourage someone to take a risk that leads to a breakthrough. And third, it can build trust, right? It can build trust by showing people that you believe in their ability to handle truth and responsibility. At its core, courageous conversations are about investment, right? An investment in people's potential, in team culture, and in long-term success. Right, let's move to this particular question, right, that I said we would deal with earlier on. So what holds us back then from having these conversations? So let's explore a couple of reasons that I would like to propose to you. So, if we know that courageous conversations are so powerful, and they are, why do we then avoid them? Here are a few common reasons I would like to suggest. One, fear of conflict. We don't want to make the other person uncomfortable, or ourselves for that matter. Two, we have this innate desire often to be liked. Not all of us, but certainly some of us, and I would even dare suggest many leaders do. I'm certainly one of those leaders. I like to be liked. It's nice to be liked. But it can be damaging psychologically, and it can be counterintuitive and counterproductive, right? We worry that telling people the hard truth might damage relationships. Can I be honest? I'm still working on this myself, but I'm conscious about it. Reason number 3 that I'd like to suggest why we often want to avoid these courageous conversations. Sometimes it's the lack of skills. You just don't know what you don't know. You don't know how to handle courageous conversations, because there are ways that you can do, or you can employ to have these courageous relationships that can bring out the best in others, and there are other ways that can go south and can actually create an explosive situation, even though your intentions were pure. So the lack of skills, many leaders simply haven't been trained on how to navigate these conversations very well. The 4th reason that I'd like to propose and suggest is that we avoid these relationships or these conversations, potentially because of past negative experiences. If we have had difficult conversations before that possibly went badly and exploded in our faces, we might be hesitant to try again. And this is also true in relationships, romantic relationships, marital relationships, and friendships. But the truth is, folks, avoiding these conversations doesn't make problems go away. It just buries them, allowing them to grow into bigger issues later. Courageous conversations are not just about criticism. They are about clarity. They are about creating opportunities for growth, not breaking people down. So, folks, how do we then build a culture of courageous conversations? How do you as a leader do that? I've got some good news for you. There are tools that you can employ. There are ways that you can kickstart this journey. Here are a few steps that I would like to suggest, for you to build an environment where courageous conversations are not only feared, in fact, are not feared at all, but they are normalized. 1, are you ready? Please take down some notes if you haven't. Set the tone with your own vulnerability. Sounds familiar, right? Set the tone with your own vulnerability. People will only be open to courageous conversations if they see you engaging in them yourself. Share your own lessons, admit mistakes, and be open to receiving feedback. What this does is it creates psychological safety. Number 2, approach conversations with care and clarity. Being courageous doesn't mean being harsh. Yeah, this is very important. Being courageous doesn't mean being harsh. Use what is often termed the 3 C's, 3 times C, 3 C's framework when giving feedback. What is that? Clarity, care, collaboration. Let's unpack that for a moment. Clarity. Be direct about the issue, but keep it constructive. What do we mean by care? Show that your intent is to help, not to harm. And 3, collaboration. Make it a 2-way discussion, not a lecture. So in other words, ask questions more than you are actually telling the other person. Ask more than you do tell. For example, instead of saying, "You are not performing well," right? Instead, say, "I've noticed that deadlines are being missed, and I'd like to understand what's going on so we can find a way to fix them, so we can find a solution rather together," right? I've noticed that deadlines are being missed, and I'd like to understand what's going on so we can find a solution together. And you keep absolutely quiet and let the other person speak and have their say. Number 3, normalize regular feedback. Come on, guys. Feedback must never ever be left to the big moments, the performance appraisal, the annual performance, or quarterly, or half yearly Make it a regular part of your everyday conversation. When you observe, I think of an example of a coach in the soccer context. The coach is always on the touchline, is always on the side of the field. It's very much, he may not be in the field, but it's very much a part of the field. When he observes a leader, or rather a player, playing in a position that was not agreed upon, or executing a plan or a strategy in a way that is inconsistent with what the match dictates, the coach in the moment intervenes and shouts and points, and there's a sign language. There's also a way in which to correct right there on the spot while the match is on, so that you don't wait until it's too late to correct. You give the other person an opportunity to correct while the match is on, and therefore give them a chance for the team, give the bigger team a chance, an opportunity to win the match, as opposed to only saying it after the fact. You with me? Courageous conversations should not just happen then when there's a problem. Create a habit of ongoing feedback, both positive and constructive. This makes tough conversations, feel less personal and more like a natural part of growth. 4, encourage a growth mindset. Help your team see the feedback as a tool for growth, not just as criticism. Celebrate progress, not just perfection. Reinforce the idea that courageous conversations are about unlocking potential, not punishing failure. Number 5, and this is the final point on this. One conversation alone, my leaders, won't change the culture. And what am I speaking about here? I'm speaking about follow up and reinforce. That's number 5. Follow up and reinforce. One conversation alone won't change a culture. You got to follow up, check in, recognize improvements. This reinforces the idea that these conversations are meaningful and lead to real progress. Folks, leadership is not about keeping everyone comfortable. It's not. It's about calling people higher. I recently had a couple of tough conversations with my own current team. And the one thing I kept emphasizing is where we are going demands a much more from us than what we have been giving. It demands a higher calling, a recognition that this is a higher calling. We've got to become a better version of ourselves to get further than where we are, and certainly where we've been. Right? So leadership is about calling people higher. It's about seeing the best in them, even when they don't see it in themselves. And sometimes that means having courageous conversations that stretch them beyond their comfort zones. If you want to unlock the potential in others, start normalizing courageous conversations. Lean into the discomfort, trust the process, and watch how it transforms your leadership and your team. Friends, that's it for today's episode of the mplyLebo Leadership Podcast. If you found value in today's discussion, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with other leaders who could benefit. Until next time, lead with courage, lead with clarity, and lead with care. Thank you for tuning in. See you next time. Eita Daar.